couple of other places.
Initially, the people in England didn't like that, and they made a lot of jokes about this. And also the word roundabout is just a joke. People were talking about it. It's a terrible thing. They go just round about this island. And that is the reason of this word in English.
Despite the mockery, the concept stuck and was refined into the modern roundabout in the UK around 1960. It was the British and other European designers who improved on the design by making the circle in the center smaller, reducing the lanes, and ensuring vehicles already in the circle have the right of way over those entering.
You're bringing the car to slowing it down so that it's not just speeding kind of through these intersections. It's a very subtle change, but actually made a big impact.
Transportation researcher Lee Rodegertz says estimates of roundabouts in the top European countries are about 30 to 50,000 in France, about 30,000 in Spain, and 25,000 in the United Kingdom. This isn't perfect, but let me put that all in perspective. The US has about 290 million cars, and France about 39 million. Let's say there are about 40,000 roundabouts in France. If the US had as many roundabouts per vehicle as France does, we should have something in the area of 300,000. We currently have 10,000. Bear in mind, the comparison has limitations. The US has large swaths of sparsely populated land and longer distances between areas.
The U.S. has large swaths of sparsely populated land and longer distances between areas. Swath. A long strip or large area, especially of land. Yes, the huge swath of what is now Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia was blanketed by dangerous radiation.
A lot of other countries adopted it very robustly, but we didn't really do that here for a number of years.
So why not the US? There were a few main reasons. One, Eno's initial traffic circle concept was adopted by other designers in ways that were ever more complicated. A lot of these were often called rotaries.
They were much bigger, you would change lanes in them, they had other kind of traffic islands in them sometimes, and they really didn't prove to be much safer than the way that the roads were configured before. And so they actually wound up falling out of favor in the United States. They didn't really have much of a utility because we kind of over-engineered and over-designed these.
Of course, there were large traffic circles in places across Europe, but inefficient designs were mostly abandoned, and there was a kind of modern homegrown alternative that was ready to replace them. Meanwhile, the traffic signal became the traffic control method of choice at intersections in America, thanks in part to aggressive salespeople.
They would go into these communities and provide lots of free advice for how to improve safety and traffic congestion in these intersections. And hey, by the way, we have these signals that we can sell you. As we were electrifying lots of the country, all this kind of went hand in hand, and it became, it probably became a rational, modern approach to improving these intersections, as opposed to this old model from the turn of the century.
Finally, as traffic control became a standardized discipline in the US, people in the profession looked to the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which is the blueprint traffic engineers use to design roads.
It lays out, I guess you would say, simpler, more straightforward intersections, again, that are signalized, as opposed to roundabouts, which may take up a little bit more space, especially in an urban environment. It may eat up more of the landscape than a signalized intersection. They may take a little bit longer to pull together.
The first modern roundabouts in the United States were constructed in Nevada in 1990. That is 3 decades after the modern roundabout was introduced in the UK. Americans are often resistant to the idea of introducing a roundabout in their communities.
A lot of it was inertia, right?
A lot of it was inertia, right? Inertia. Inertia is the tendency of a physical object to remain still or to continue moving, unless a force is applied to it. We must remember that some people have a greater inertia than others.
Traffic engineering and inertia go hand in hand, and did for a number of years. And it's only now that we're starting to see where some of those problems are, actually starting to see some of the challenges with some of the ideas that Mr. Eno pulled together.
When Jim Brainerd took the helm of Carmel, Indiana in late 1996, roundabouts were nowhere in the city or on the minds of people he consulted.
When Jim Brainerd took the helm of Carmel, Indiana in late 1996, roundabouts were nowhere in the city or on the minds of people he consulted. Helm. You can say that someone is at the helm when they are leading or running a country or organization. After more than a decade at the helm of Colorado State University, Albert C. Yates today announced his retirement.
Everyone suggested adding more lanes.
I didn't have a background in civil engineering, knew nothing about civil engineering, so I kept asking questions. And many times the answers I got were, I don't know why we do it that way, that's just the way we were taught. And they just didn't think about it. And so we had some really good engineers and said, okay, let's rethink this.
Since then, Carmel has replaced all but a handful of its traffic lights and plans to finish off the rest of the conversions within years. Roundabouts have been catching on in the rest of the U.S.
Roundabouts have been catching on in the rest of the U.S. Catches on. If something catches on, it becomes popular. The idea has been around for ages without catching on.
The country has been adding around 500 to 700 of them per year for the past 15 years or so. States such as New York and Virginia have adopted roundabout-first policies that require giving preference to roundabouts when building or repairing intersections. Researcher Wang Hu lives in Northern Virginia.
Yeah, I can tell from my experience in this area where I'm living. I just started to see more and more roundabouts being built.
The states with the most roundabouts? Florida, California, and Colorado.
We did several surveys in some U.S. communities where several roundabouts were built, and we found that, yes, at the beginning, the percentage of the drivers who would favor the idea of roundabouts was relatively low. But once the drivers get the chance of driving around the roundabouts and then get more experience driving around the roundabouts, they are more acceptable.
That said, these are not considered perfect. There are a few potential drawbacks depending on the needs and the designs.
There are a few potential drawbacks depending on the needs and the designs. Drawback. A drawback is an aspect of something or someone that makes them less acceptable than they would otherwise be. He felt the only drawback of the apartment was that it was too small.
The Guardian in 2015 reported that some cities in the UK are removing roundabouts in favor of traffic lights. They said the roundabouts were actually worse for bicyclists. It seems to depend on how the roundabout is designed and whether it has a protected lane for bicyclists. A review of 49 studies found that roundabouts can actually dramatically increase bicycle crashes unless there is a protected bike lane. Researchers in Belgium found that single-lane roundabouts without a protected bike lane increased crashes by 93%, while Danish researchers said roundabouts that did have separated lanes saw an 84% reduction in crashes. Brainerd has said an increase in crashes involving bicyclists has not happened in Carmel. It is also observed that single-lane roundabouts have a harder time accommodating a throughput of more than 25,000 cars per day.
We have one solution which has partly two lanes on the circle. We call it turbo roundabouts. They have been invented in the Netherlands, and some of them are also being used in Germany. And they come up to a capacity of 31,000, 35,000, but this is still not much. If you have more traffic, then in Germany you need a signalized intersection.
Werner Brilon designed one such multi-lane roundabout in the German city of Baden-Baden, and there are also some in the Netherlands.
But this type is only useful under specific conditions. If you have one predominating movement, then it is useful. If traffic is distributed over all the entrances and exits rather equally, then it doesn't work.
The risk is that the more lanes or other elements there are, the more confusing it can be for drivers, at least at first.
Over the long term, over a few years after the roundabouts were built, we see increasing safety benefits at these double-lane roundabouts. We think probably because as the drivers gain more experience navigating these roundabouts, they know how it works, they know how to drive through it, and then we should expect larger safety benefits at these roundabouts.
Carmel even has a roundabout on the Keystone Parkway, a high-traffic highway. And the city has no intention of going back to stoplights.
We had to build a city that was beautiful and worked really well if we were going to compete. And we have been able to compete. We have 150 corporate headquarters in Carmel. We have been rated over and over by various organizations one of the best places to live in the United States, one of the best places to retire, one of the best places to raise families, one of the best places for single people. And so it's because we set out to build a city that worked, and the transportation network is one of those basic things that a city has to do right for it to work.